So we're all here,
We
right?
are.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for coming and welcome to our panel number 2 of the Uncertainty of Fate Festival. I'm Rita Porphyris. I'm the artistic director of the festival, and it's been an amazing 4 days so far of discussions and concerts and master classes. It's been really incredible to see all the work and have all these conversations. This panel is called Activating and Agitating for Change in Your Respective Institutions. And I think we all could use a little of that, more of that probably. Change is needed and has been needed for a long time. Some people have been having this discussion way more than other people. And I think it's important for all of us to maybe start having that discussion and be given the tools to start having that discussion. So I'm so excited to have our panelists with us today. They've all been people who have been active and having these important conversations long before any of us. And I'm just going to turn it over to Kalita, the wonderful and amazing Kalita Jones, who is the Director of Engagement at the Hart School, as well as being a consultant to the stars and to arts organizations across the country and the world. And she will introduce everyone else. Kalita.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you for creating this project and activating this dialogue and these performances. I think this is so important, and I love the way that you put it together urgently, because this is an urgent conversation. Even though we've been having it for decades, it is urgent. It's an honor to hold space with all of you today. And if you all have any questions that you would like for the panelists to ponder, feel free to drop it in the chat to the panelists and attendees, or you can send it directly to me. Like Rita said, I'm the Director of Engagement at the Hart School, and also do a lot of consulting work surrounding EDIA. And I'm gonna turn it over to my panelists. Y'all have 90 seconds to do your intros, although I know your intros are like massive. These are three of my favorite colleagues and friends in my life, and I'm so honored to hold space with them and to share them with all of you today. So Camille, you're first on my screen.
Of course I am. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So my name is Camille Delaney McNeil. I'm currently the Director of Programs for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra Orchids program. So very interesting place to be, but we love it and we love the kids. And I am a classically trained musician. I'm a flautist and a singer. And I came to the work of social change through music, as we like to call it in the field, through Orchids. Dan Trahey, who's listening to this, introduced me as well. So thank you, because it opened my eyes to something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life, youth advocacy. So I've been doing that, and I've been on panels with the wonderful Kalita and Kay here, who you're about to meet. And wanting to be as disruptive and as poignant and an advocate as possible for our young people, and showing that excellence exists in all communities, particularly our Brown and Black communities and our children. And they need to be elevated and they need to be respected. So this is going to be a very fun discussion. I'm had an espresso. I'm ready to go. I'm working off of 4 hours of sleep. I'm a new mom again. So this is going to be a great conversation, but I'm excited, and that's a little bit about my background.
Thank you, Camille. Samuel, you're next on my screen.
Okay, excuse me, excuse me. Thank you, Kalita, and good morning, everyone. My name is Samuel Thompson. I am also in Baltimore. I'm currently the program director of the Bridges program, which will be celebrating 15 years in the 21-22 school year. I am also a trained musician. I'm a violinist, and my path coming to this was very interesting because I actually started getting immersed in social justice work in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina. And that was outside of the field of classical music. And it wasn't until I moved to Baltimore in 2010 that things started shifting, including what seemed to be the very natural progression of moving into becoming a program director after being a teacher in the same program for 2 years. I'm really honored and humbled to be on this panel because I know that Kendia, Camille, and Kalita have been doing this work and having conversations for much longer than I have, and it's always a joy to hear them. So let's get it going.
Thank you, and Kay.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Candea, but you will hear my friends and colleagues refer to me as Kay, so that is okay as well. I am one of the senior program managers for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra's Orchids program. I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago. Sky is behind me. So welcome this morning. You get some beach in your life. And I am a steel pan musician. I made it all the way in my music education to Berklee College of Music, where I graduated in music business and management with a minor in Africana Studies, Music and Society. And I have to say that that is important because it kind of shaped the lens of where I went into music education after that. So I've been with Orchids since 2013. And again, thanks to Dan Trahey and a program that they had set up with UMBC, where I would get to learn about the Baltimore Symphony's education program. So not just Orchids, but everything that they were doing with education. And Orchids is near and dear to me because I also grew up in Baltimore. So I am here today as a representative of the students that are from Baltimore who are willing and ready to have arts education and music education at their feet and can do a lot with it and make some changes in their life and progress and do things. So I am standing in the gap. I have come back and I'm standing in the gap for our students, and like Camille and Samuel said, doing the work to be their advocate and finding the systems and breaking them down so that they can get through the pipeline and the channel. So I am excited for this conversation this morning as well.
Thank you for all of your introductions. I think it's important to note that the three of us, Kay, Camille, and myself, we're all deeply embedded in this work because of the step back that Dan Trahey did and gave us the opportunity to step up. I started a social change program in Waterbury almost 10 years ago with students in Waterbury. So I stood in that gap for a while, and then I came back to my alma mater because I wanted to, my dreams are huge and the impact has to be larger. And I wanted to stand on a platform where I could elevate them and step back. And so I had that example modeled for me. So I know most of you are used to attending panels where there's a moderator and someone asks questions. We don't rock like that. So I'm just putting that out there. If that's your cup of tea and if that's the recipe you were hoping for today, my apologies. We dialogue about this. We talk about it like a conversation. So that's how we're gonna rock today. And I hope that's okay with you. And if it's not, that's okay too. You might probably want to journal about that later. But let's get into the meat of this. So I don't know about the three of you. We've had some conversations about agitating change and looking at institutions that hold space in theory, right, for more diversity, which is a hot button word, and more inclusion, another hot button word. But lately, and I don't know if you all are feeling this, but I'm gonna go ahead and speak my truth. I am feeling battle fatigue because, you know, our students are working their hardest to get into those rooms, right? And to show that they are just as important, just as valid, yet there are still systems in the field that are making the process incredibly challenging, difficult, sometimes impossible for our students to flourish, to grow, to live their truth and their culture and who they are as humans and as contributors to society, essentially, right? So where are you all sitting in that? Like, I know we're probably at 1,000,000 in terms of fatigue, but in terms of how you want to radically agitate things, like how is that looking for you all? I know that Camille and Kay actively are students are going to college now. Like we're past that baby stage. Our babies are in college, okay? And so now, how are we creating a space that's safe for them? And then Samuel, also feel free to chime in terms of your Bridges students, and I'll sprinkle in here and there. I won't try to overwhelm the situation, but no, whoever wants to start.
Well, no, I'll start, Kalita. I wanted to actually call back to a point that you were saying around, how are we feeling about the status of things and how things are going. And I just want to make an observation with this. I think what I'm thankful for, what I'm grateful for is the spark, the ignition that seems to have happened in the past year across not only arts institutions and culture institutions, but also globally in the world regarding equity, regarding social justice, right? And oftentimes I'll say this, and I've said this before time and time again, the arts, our cultural institutions help model examples for the rest of the world, for the country, for how it can be done, right? It's kind of like this breeding ground where it's very fertile and then it manifests and kind of spills out. And I just feel like that's the arts in general, right? So you have that, but what I am seeing, and even in my daily experiences, I mean, let's be raw and authentic about things, right? We are trying to apply old solutions to these problems. The issue with that is that these old solutions are part and parcel, and again, married to the issues of why we are where we are today. So that's a bit discouraging. I'm trying to apply old thinking to how things should go. Well, when we wanted to figure something out, we created a group and a committee, and then we were in meetings for 3 months, and then we had a great mission charter after that, and then we did this, but we can't do those kinds of things. We have to be flexible, and we have to think differently. And that's reflective of you still not calling people into the space who think differently than you, who apply different sets of solutions. So, before even saying what we're trying to do, we're still fighting against that. And so when we're talking about everyone creating systemic change, being uncomfortable, you also have to be uncomfortable with the way that you used to orient yourself and how you approached problems may not work anymore. And I want to say this too, and I'll shut up after this. If you are a leader of an institution or an organization, and I call myself to this too, if you don't know me, if you don't know about me, I'm going to call out Quanice Floyd. If you don't know about her, you need to research her. She said this beautifully. If you don't know about me and you hear things about me, you need to come and ask. And we have a conversation, and then you'll know, and you'll know the truth. I hold myself accountable as a leader, and these leaders of organizations need to be nimble and responsive and reactive to things that need to change. And if you cannot do that, then you need not be a leader and step aside and step back for someone else to assume that. And that's hard. That is a hard pill to swallow, but it has to be done.
That's great. You hit the nail on the head. Okay, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I will add to that right now where I am, like I said, I'm standing in the gap. I have gone through the system. All of us that are on this call today, our graduates have made it out of the system. The rigorous training that everybody put us through to uphold and take care of music. I talk about Berkeley, but I also on the steel pan have been playing classical music. I have colleagues that do the same thing. And where I come from, the arts are really embedded in our community in Trinidad and Tobago. It's a very arts-rich culture. So none of what I'm saying just specifically applies to music. We have all now, this generation of us, gone through the tertiary education, the auditioning for orchestras and theater jobs and all of the above. And we can recognize the system because we have gone through it. We can recognize all the problems when they come up because we faced them and we had to overcome them in a certain way. So now, as I've shared with my colleagues, we're preparing students to walk into what we hope is going to change, but we're also having to realize that we also have to be there in those spaces to help do the work. Not the only ones to do the work, but to help you recognize where it is. But the only way you're going to recognize where and what is happening is if you open your eyes to do so. Because if you are resistant to doing that, you're never going to see it. If you're always questioning what we are saying, this is an example of my student isn't progressing this way because there's a barrier. The barrier is an economic barrier, not the barrier of them just not taking the information. I said this during the pandemic. It's opened my eyes so much to education. My grandmother was an educator, and so I have always had great educators. We're in a different space. We have a different responsibility once we walk into this education realm because we're exchanging knowledge, and we're also, as Camille put it, trying to help these younger people learn how to interact with each other in society. So for us as musicians, we're using music as a different way to communicate and lay the groundwork for a common understanding of emotion. How can we get along in this ensemble if we don't even know each other? We could, but the music might not sound the best that it will. And as a leader of an ensemble or a music department or arts department, you have to know your students in order to bring out the best in your students. What I'm seeing, where I'm standing, we have gotten so academic about teaching our arts that we're forgetting that these human beings are human beings. You're not interacting with the human beings anymore. And so you're not actually teaching them how to do so. And you're not opening the lanes for different outcomes to be acceptable for them. You want the outcome that you have experienced or that you know to be the end goal, to be the only end goal. And if your students do not walk down that line, that somehow it doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense to you. They're not in the same frame. So as Camille put it, the system hasn't changed. You're doing the same thing and expecting the new students that all of us are educating, having gone through the system, having known all of the falls and the pitfalls and all the things. This bunch of students that are coming to you that are in college now, if you want to talk in terms of computers, I did computer science for a while, are a little bit smarter. They're working smarter, not harder, because we've given them some tools. And so now they're coming to you and making you uncomfortable because you have always done something a certain way. And they're causing you to have to pivot and shift to them and what they want, which should always be the case. As an educator, I've watched some educators work with some educators in public schools. They don't get a choice to not teach all the students that have learning disabilities and different things like that. So once you become a part of, and I'm talking from the education system, I haven't even hit the orchestra yet. I'm just simply talking about education.
That's not for today, Kay. Okay. We don't have time. Okay, we can't. That's a different book. Real quick before I toss it over to Samuel, you know, you spoke about how there's a level of resistance or discomfort with aligning yourself with where your students are, right? So what we're seeing is the trend is shifting. No longer are people training to necessarily go to orchestras, right? Or or necessarily want to be performers. Like we're seeing a mix of performing and entrepreneurship. So why aren't we making that a requirement? Why aren't we encouraging our teachers to do more training surrounding entrepreneurship? Talk about your failures. Failure builds success. And I think that's probably one thing that really gets under my skin is the fact that when we what we see as failure, when I say we, because I believe it's collective, I'm talking about educators, it's a negative thing. And it's never negative because all of the failures that each of us on this screen has had is what has gotten us to where we are right now, where we're able to have this dialogue. Samuel.
Oh, wow. I, I'm sorry. I'm a part
You
of me
okay?
I'm
You all
okay. A
right?
part of me though feels like I want to just sit back and listen to the three of you. But there's so many things that have been said that are absolutely right. And thinking about making teach educators, requiring educators to talk more about entrepreneurship instead of the old paradigms. It's so funny that there are a lot of young people who have an entrepreneurial spirit and they do things without being taught by there may be family members that have shown them things. Um, and it's interesting that over the last 10 years, 10 or 11 years, all of a sudden, all of these schools are coming up with these entrepreneurship programs for conservatory students. But in the big picture, thinking about the field as a continuum, I've been curious as to why we don't talk about the fact that some of these artists that we revere as the greatest, um, like Jascha Heifetz or Fritz Kreisler, and as well as being absolutely superb on their instruments, they were all about their money. You know, Fritz Kreisler made all those arrangements and made all those recordings because um, it's funny being a teacher and now being an administrator. It's very interesting noticing the obstacles that people have talked about. And it's very true. You don't notice them unless you keep your eyes open. It's been challenging this year, but it's been really wonderful in some ways because of the pandemic, um, to make sure that I myself and my staff make a real concerted effort to keep the human element of this program first and foremost. And I'm wondering if anybody else has had difficulty with that because everything has been virtual. And I know that there's some people who are staying virtual to the end of the school year. I know that there's some programs that have come back. Um,
That is such a good point, Samuel. Like, and actually, when I think about that, the virtual aspect, right? Like there are people that are like, I just want to do it this way forever, which is just it's crazy when you think about it. It's like, well, but our babies need to feel your energy, right? They need to be in the same space. They need to cohabit space with you. We are able to do what we do because we cohabited space with other people. So that humanistic side is a lifeline. And when I think about our students now that are matriculating into institutions, and I just dropped it in the chat, they had to be entrepreneurs. They were entrepreneurs by 4 years old. They did not have a choice. They did not come from the privilege I came from. And when you look at it that way, it is a personal responsibility of educators to see where their students are, right? And then acknowledge that and do whatever you can in your power to harness and nurture that aspect of that student. So the goal does not have to be to play Don Juan perfectly, but maybe the goal can be to talk about why Don Juan is so important. Maybe they are an ethnomusicologist in the making. Maybe they are an executive director, a CEO, a CFO. And to harness that, I think we've missed thousands, millions of opportunities to harness greatness in a lot of students that are now out in the world trying to make things work, trying to scrap things together, right? So can we talk a little bit about that? Because I'm wondering, I'm thinking about our babies and what are we going to do when they come out of these institutions? What are we going to do? Because they coming out with debt. Some of them are coming out with debt. And the jobs and the debt don't line up. Okay, folks, we all know this. We all know this. We live in that life.
Oh,
Yeah.
Kalita.
Um,
Go ahead.
Oh, paper rock. You know, I was thinking about this yesterday. Myself being a performer who was trained to play Don Juan perfectly. Cricket. And but you know, coming out with debt, and you know, I've had a couple positions in orchestras, but like so many people, I wear many hats to survive. And I started thinking about it. I'm really grateful that my teacher in graduate school, Mr. Goldsmith, just was so open and loving to all of us. And there's so many people that studied with him who did not pursue careers in music, who were far better violinists and musicians than I am. Somebody just became a member of Vermont, like the Vermont state government. Just an example. But I was thinking about it. Why is it in our field, even though you've just said it, that the world is wide open and that there's so many paths and we seem to find them, there still seems to be some unspoken that if someone chooses one of those other paths instead of like beating their head against the performance wall, that there's some sort of failure. Meanwhile, there's some other fields where to really succeed in them, you have to have some business acumen, but people assume in those fields, but people are made aware in those fields, one of them specifically, that if you're getting to a point that you're not getting multi-million-dollar contracts and things are going to set you up for life, that you have to look for the other doors that are open in that business. And that is ironically modeling.
There's a devaluation, Sam. That's exactly right. There's a devaluation on if you don't fit this narrow vein of a track, of the performance track. But meanwhile, in order to even create the opportunity, in order to even keep the lights on, you know, get the curriculum written, make sure the performance hall is maintained, there's a whole nother skill set that one has to, marketing, you know, business, there's a whole nother skill set that one has to learn, but, you know, yet I'm less than. Let me tell you something. If someone else comes to me and says, oh, well, you're just admin, I will lose my mind. I am a performer. Put me on stage and I will play my butt off. But I also know how to make a spreadsheet. I also know how to make a budget. I also know how to have conversations. I did not learn that in my performance track. I was fortunate to get influences from other areas of my life. So Kalita talked about privilege. There is privilege at multiple layers. And even amongst people of color, I had the privilege of that. But see, this is what we need to do. We need to turn that, we need to peel back that onion to make our blooming onion and onion rings. No, we need to peel back that onion and really flip things around, because to devalue that and to elevate, it's this hierarchical structure. And we actually talk about that in the education world, about things being more individually based, which is a very Western based culture of learning, and then things being community based, and the ends to the means to the end, right? And we get there as a community. It's very group oriented. And you'll notice in particular cultures, that is more important than individual achievement. You beat everybody in the class, you learned it the best. What ultimately is that going to do if you cannot lift up others around you to make the thing work, right? So there really needs to be an adjustment in the thinking of devaluing this particular track versus this. Let's make it equal, and let's see what that does. We can produce such beautiful outcomes, so much diversity if we think differently.
I'm going to say something that is going to probably rattle some people here.
Wait, we about to be uncomfortable. Hold on. Let me shut up. Okay.
America itself runs on Dunkin' Donuts. No, America itself runs on, no, using Dunkin' Donuts as a platform on entrepreneurship and business. So it doesn't matter what field I study, unless my mom is an accountant. So unless I'm already in the business field, it doesn't matter what field I go into. I need to learn how to generate income for myself. I'm speaking about America because I live here right now. I could probably say the same about every other country, but I'm talking about America right now. Kalita put in the chat, we shouldn't have to create double majors for our students to walk out with the information, because in us being in these positions ourselves, in these educational institutions, whatever places we hold, we are part of an ecosystem that is in itself an industry. You know about all the different industries that have come around here. It itself, education itself, is an industry that has put certain demarcations for us to even get in the door, for us to make a certain amount of money, for us to be able to impart knowledge in a certain way. So wherever I fit myself into this system, it's still a system itself, right? As somebody that is looking and going into the education space, and I think this is what I was going to say. I think that we have to realize where we fit in, that the education system was set up for us arts people to be able to get a degree, to be able to get ourselves to a certain space. That was the thing. So we're not just coming into this space. We shouldn't be walking out of this space with a bachelor's degree, master's degree, whatever it is, just in performance. Because you know what? From the school I went to, there are people outside of my institution doing the same thing. And when we come together in the industry, we all have to still play music together. So regardless of if I got a degree or they didn't get a degree, let's talk about pop music, her right now. She didn't go to my college, but the musicians in her band went to my college. I know them. They still have to drive the industry. They're still being marketed. They're still doing all of their work together. So what is the difference if I go to college and I spend my 4 years at your institution? What is the difference that you're going to give me? I should be walking out with a business acumen. I should know how to read my contracts. I should know how to demand and ask for more money. I should know these things. That should be the upper. That should
Absolutely.
be what I did if I spend my time.
Absolutely.
But see, there's a question in the chat, and I think, Kay, that speaks to just, I'll quickly say, I think it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Are we on the trajectory for folks to do that? Well, no, not really, because if we're still not creating a process for students to learn in this nucleus, right, in this sacred place of this institution that they're, kicking money to, and you come out of school and I need you to know how to do all these things and you can't, no, we're still not fixing the problem. What we're doing is we're calling things out. We're breaking things down. I still think we're in the breaking down phase. And at this point, we need visionaries and thinkers to be there once the rubble settles and say, and here's your pathway forward. And whether that's the people on this Zoom today, in this meeting, across the country. There's so many talented thought leaders and visionaries for this. Really need to be setting that groundwork, because the institutions are calling. I will say that some of them are calling, some of them are waking up, and we want to have a plan for them. Do we do all the work by ourselves? No, but we have to get in there and we have to have that plan.
Can I also say,
Camille, I think, oh, sorry, Kay, hold on. Instead of do, it should. Should we do all the work ourselves? No, no. The DNA test came back and no.
We're not.
Like, I mean, but seriously, like, I mean, and Kay, I'll kick it to you, but we have to disrupt the norm, right? So that means that some relationships with people who are not from your standard list of go-tos should be activated and created, and then invite them to your school, make them a resident artist, and have them impart their knowledge on our students, instead of, well, I've been doing this for 42 years and I'm all knowing. I certainly don't think I'm all knowing. I will happily step back and let somebody else lead so that I can grow. But I think we're also uncomfortable with that. I think that's a level of discomfort. Okay.
response to you, Kalita, it goes to what I was gonna say. What we are shifting, what we're in a paradigm shift of, is education a right or a privilege? Because just because I got a scholarship to come to your school, Samuel knows where I'm going with this. That is the shift that needs to happen. That's the challenge that I'm going to give to educators, because once I get into the space, and you hold the thought that I'm lucky to be here, and this starts from very young. Doesn't matter. I will say, even the groups of things that are teaching the youngest ones. If you come into any space as an educator and you hold the thought that a child is lucky to have had X, lucky to be here, that's gonna get in the path. That's gonna get in the way of you imparting knowledge to people the way you're supposed to. That goes back to Camille's statement about individuality and collectivism. We just share. There's nothing that I know that I'm not gonna share with my students, having walked through this whole pathway of how did I leave from Baltimore to get to Berkeley. It wasn't a straight path. I'm gonna share all of that with you, because as Kalita said, all of my failures are tools and lessons for you to now learn what to do, what not to do. You have options, how to rebound. I'm making myself vulnerable and sharing that with you, so you have a leg up, and you might not face the same challenges as I do. I graduated from Berkeley 10 years ago. The world is different now. My students are walking into a completely different space, but there are some educators, a lot of educators in those spaces, that still hold those mindsets. What can they do to overcome that when they're there? And then what is the actual challenge that they're facing outside of that bubble of the institution when they come out as a first generation student, as all of these things that they're going to have to battle socioeconomically when they walk out of school with a performance degree. They need to be on their toes, ready to go. And they're asking the question, they're going to get this is the other thing, they're going to get the answers from in the school or from not in the school. They're going to ask their community, they're going to consult YouTube University. You're not the only information coming at your students either.
Right.
So I'll leave that there.
Bouncing off of things that everybody said, especially, I think it was either Kalita or Camille that said, bring in people from outside and make them your artists in residence. It's interesting, having watched over the last 5 years, and there's so many people in the field who are offering course packages themselves. And I'm wondering if those are like course packages and letting themselves be known as mentors who will teach people things that they won't necessarily learn in school, like how to negotiate contracts, etc. Are those the people that you're thinking of, or the types of things that you're thinking of as far as bringing people in who can share that knowledge as artists in residence? Or is anybody thinking that the institutions, because people are doing this work, may start to become obsolete because students will make the choice to either get in debt and so that they can have a Gucci bag, meaning the name of a school, or move to a city and go study with somebody 2 years so that they can really get their hands dirty?
Oof. Well,
Sorry.
I was specifically speaking to bringing individuals in who have done that work, who maybe didn't even go to the institutions that we all came from. I think that that lens of individual is going to bring a totally different perspective to how you're going to build your career, how you're going to build your life. And they're coming from experiences that are fresh, right? And maybe a little bit more relatable to where our current generation of students are. And yes, Rodney, I'm shouting you out because I just read your comment. We should feel lucky that students are listening to us. And but at the same time, we also sometimes need to press mute on ourselves and allow them to educate us on what they desire. I think that you will find that you'll have better results with a student-led vision of the curriculum, a student-led vision of the syllabus, a student-led vision of programming. And that's going to challenge people like ourselves who have been indoctrinated with this is my syllabus, this is my curriculum, and this is how I want to do it. But you can't say that and then in the same breath be emotional about George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or Tamir Rice or Eric Garner. You can't have both. Can't have both. You can't feel something for 6 weeks, but still hold on to the way you've always done things, because then your mindset, like Camille said, it's not growth, it's fixed. I'm gonna let that sit in the air a little bit. I know I might have pressed the hot button there, but it's true. I mean, if we look at the institutions across the country that have, put out statements and said, we're going to fix this, we're going to change things, we're going to hire people, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Let's check in. I want to call all the majors, like the ones with the fat endowments. Like, I want to know what y'all doing. Who, what's going on? Like, I want to know, because if you're saying that you're for a life, but you're not doing something actively that's action-based to address it, then are you really for that? Are you rowdy about it? Like,
But we know that a lot of times these organizations that have the big endowments, they'll talk the talk, but they won't walk the walk until they have to.
They don't have to now, though. You don't feel like
no, and I'm saying they have. I'm saying that they have to now, but just as an example, Berlin Philharmonic started their digital concert hall in 2008, 2009. There's so many people in the United States. Oh, this would be great. Why doesn't Philly do this? Why doesn't this orchestra do this? Why? Now, because of overwhelming necessity, everybody's having digital concert halls during the pandemic, and all these organizations are saying this is here to stay, even though we're going back into live performance, because they had no choice.
But see, the change
or die.
The change is forward facing, though, y'all, and the concern is, like Kalita said, once you're past your 6 months of grieving, who's peeling back the curtain to make sure those.
For the record, I said 6 weeks. I didn't give them 6 months.
Oh, okay. Okay, but you know what I'm saying? So who's peeling back the curtain to make sure that infrastructure is the same? Because again, when your eyes are, it's kind of like our political system right now, right? We're comfortable again. So we're not glued to the TV every, 24 hours. We're not listening constantly and wondering, oh God, what's happening now? We're getting comfortable. We will get comfortable again. So So think about this, and I charge everyone here today and anyone listening to this, take it upon your personal self to be a person who infiltrates and who holds institutions accountable. Our institution at the BSO is being held accountable on a daily basis, by the way. I'm all for it. I'm all for it, in case you were wondering. So, but again, understand and peel back all the layers and know about the work that is being done. Do not make assumptions about what is being done. So, I think, and support the people who might be doing more than you think is happening. So again, we need to be instigators. We need to come with solutions. And we really need to make sure that this change is systemic, and it will go away once the fade passes. So we got to work on that.
And to piggyback on that, we need more than one person with holding the ideology to be true at this point. I don't need, again, ruffling feathers, allyship. I don't need you to like what I'm saying or what I'm doing. I need you to do it with me. Let me put it a different way. Apple would not be Apple if Steve Jobs was the only one with the idea and implementing the plan. He might be the visionary, but he needed help to build it. McDonald's did not spread all across the world as a family company, spreading joy, whatever it is that the ethos and the psychology and philosophy behind the Golden Arches did not spread all across the world, become a global thing, with the one person having the idea and trying to implement the plan by themselves. So you cannot also ask people, one person, to come on board and not give them the support either.
Right.
You have to support by adopting the ideology yourself. And also, as Samuel said, walking the walk. Whatever that means for you, institutionally, throughout the institution, it needs to be a policy shift or whatever. It needs to be embedded and phased into curriculum, inclusion policies, at every single level. Teachers, staff. Camille brought up the BSO. We're talking about the front of house staff, whatever level it is, because in encapsulating these students, there's so many adults. There's so many different minds. We're not all on the same page right now.
Not even close. Not even close.
We want to say we're on the same page. Kalita said 6 weeks. If it's 6 weeks, did you actually grieve? Because for those of us that actually grieve, we know that grief is a long process. It shows up in different ways.
Yes.
Right.
6 weeks.
Can I just, Kate, and then I'll pass it to Samuel. I think you might have had something, but in keeping us in that space of discomfort, I'm just dropping a link in the chat because I feel like in this process of addressing inequity and oppressive behaviors and things of that nature, a lot of times the process or the solutions still tend to carry characteristics of supremacy culture. And that's actually incredibly toxic and dangerous and super unhealthy. And I know for me personally, like, click on that and bookmark it on your computers when you're doing this work at whatever institution you work with, and look at how you're showing up into the work. Are you showing up with a perfectionism attitude? Are you showing up with a power dynamic that could inherently not allow Black or brown voices to be amplified and to have a larger say in the process or speak from their own lived experience within your organization? Like, really think about that. I use this chart and I think about it very carefully with every step that I take, but I cannot do that alone. None of us on this call can, nor should we. That was not my resume builder. I didn't put that on my resume. I didn't want to do that. So just something to think about.
Wow.
Sam, I thought you were going to say something.
I was going to say something, but it's just Camille and Kay and you have said it perfectly. There's so many things, especially about I'm thinking about being agitators and really thinking about accountability. That has been this year so vital with the Bridges program, because of this situation, with everybody being thrust into working, living, learning from home. Just that it's been a stretch, but it's been really wonderful to see that there's been more communication with site partners between site coordinators and myself than usual. There's been more communication with teachers. There's been more communication with families, and everybody is really, it's interesting and sometimes it's uncomfortable to see just how holding people accountable, it's not static, and it's not something from top down. It's pervasive. It can go all directions.
Can I call out, Dan has something in the chat that I think is a really important question. And I'll just give my perspective on that. And Sam, I agree with everything that you've said. Honestly, I feel like we need an exposure campaign. Okay, so let's use some strategy. Let's borrow from different fields. We need an exposure campaign to address that issue, Dan, because just think about the social awakening that happened when people were exposed to what happened to George, when people were exposed to what is happening to Black and brown people in this country being slain in the street. And this also calls back to the history in this country of lynchings. When that was being exposed, written about, covered, it started to shift the mindsets of people of, oh my God, oh, this is a problem. Yes, it's already been a problem, but now it's a problem for me because I know about it. So how do we create, let's borrow from our business partners, let's borrow from our for-profit colleagues. How do we create a crystal clear exposure and marketing plan? How do we leverage our institutions like Sphinx and other organizations that have platforms, which they are more than willing to create space for, to go to these institutions and to actually show them and to actually get them connected into what the day-to-day life is like for our students, for our communities that do not have this inherited support in order to accomplish the goal. And yes, we have now our Addition Alliance programs and, financial support, but we're still expecting them to show up with everything ready to go. And that's just not necessarily going to be the case. So we need to do that. I'll do that with somebody. I would gladly do that and do a tour. And really get these folks to understand and do a deep dive. You want to do a retreat? Let's do a retreat and come to West Baltimore and let's do a retreat. And let's walk around the neighborhood and live a day in the life.
Camille, what you're asking for requires human beings to have empathy, though.
All right.
No, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing with my college. Over last summer, I was in a space of grieving, both from the situation, from COVID, from losing my grandmother, from George Floyd, from all of everything. And I felt like there are some Berkeley alumni that are out there, Black Berkeley alumni that are out there all across the world that are going through the same thing as me. And so I was like, we don't have an alumni network to work with each other, to talk to each other, to be with each other through this process of what we're going through and support each other. So to Dan's question about how do we convince colleges, I have two things that I'm doing right now. One is be willing, as Camille said, to do the research. So I'm turning the research back around on them. They already have the research there. There's already stuff on the website that says your alumni rate of satisfaction, who had to leave the school because of economic this and that, so forth and so on. What we have done is we localized it now. We ask the same questions of our Black Berkeley alumni, and just for that population, not everybody else, just for that population, we're talking about the issues that we had. People having to leave school early because of economic things, because of things that happen in their family, because of not feeling supported with education the way that they're supposed to. And as Camille says, kind of exposing, I'm coupling that exposure of, you already have this information. You've already done the research for yourself as a university. Here is the data, again, to match it from people who have graduated over the past, because you never got us together in a room. You might have done the Family Feud kind of survey. We surveyed 100 people. No, we got to survey as a local subset of people, and you really have to know what the issue is. So that's one thing. But again, it goes back to my point, Camille, like the education system itself, the people, the players in the system have to realize, as Kalita said, that they are partaking in this thing that's holding up a supremacy that does not work, that requires people to have empathy and try to shift the power and the money in a particular place. And until that happens, with the business parts that I came out with, because I went and I did, my teacher at Berkeley asked me why I didn't study music performance. I was like, I've been performing all my life to get here. The music performance degree did not give me what I needed. So I searched out a degree at the school that gave me that, right? What I am doing with my students is I am surveying all of the options and saying although you may want to go here and these are the desires of your heart, financially, this makes more sense for you. And I will help direct them in the place. So there's two things. The colleges either need to hire the people that will take care of the education of the students in that way, and figure out how to make that a monetary, just monetary profitable for both parties, for both the student and for you as an institution. Yeah. I don't know what that means for you as an institution, whose partners, whatever you need to get endowed and all that stuff. Y'all take care of that on your business financial part. But in order for this to work for the student, we can't keep doing this, because we're walking out. Anyhow, I'm gonna stop.
So no, I hate to even stop our conversation, because as we saw last night, we could have done a whole podcast and TV show and movie, really, about this conversation, because there's so many pieces to unpack. We are right at 10 o'clock. And I want to thank our attendees for hopping in the chat, for bringing some agitation into the space. And I hope that you go back to wherever you are. And I hope you're mad. I do. I hope your energy is hot right now. I hope you're uncomfortable. And I hope you take that and activate change and start calling out things. I know that people talk about calling in, but I am sis, and sis is tired. Like, we need to start making it right for our babies. I think about my future children that are going to be on this earth trying to survive under an environment that is super heavy and laced with oppressive policies and behaviors. I don't want my kids having these conversations. That's just it. So we have to continue to do this work for our students that we're serving and loving now. So Camille, Samuel, Kay, y'all are amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time, your energy, and thank you to all of our attendees today. And we hope everyone has an amazing day, an amazing rest of the month.